Of NATO countries, especially in Europe, especially in small countries. They should be aware of what they are playing with before talking about striking Russian territory. In general, this constant escalation can lead to serious consequences.
Constant escalation can lead to serious consequences. You know his mind, you know his history. Does he bluff?
No, he's not bluffing. I think the key point here that most people in the West don't understand is that from the Russian point of view, what is happening in Ukraine represents an existential threat. This is like having a war in
threat to whom, John?
To Russia.
Right. Okay. Go ahead, please.
It's an existential threat to Russia. This is what Bill Burns said in his famous memo. And Bill Burns was saying, if you bring Ukraine into NATO, you should understand that that is an existential threat to Russian leaders. Well, we are well beyond simply bringing Ukraine into NATO. We are fighting a war right on Russia's borders. And now we're talking about taking Western weapons and attacking Mother Russia. Just think about what we're doing here. And the Russians view this, unsurprisingly, as an existential threat. So if we begin to have an effect with those attacks on the Russian homeland, you can rest assured that they're going to retaliate. And when they start to retaliate, it could involve attacking targets in Poland. It could involve attacking targets in the Baltic Sea. There are all sorts of ways that this can escalate. And just take case of them retaliating inside of Poland. If they do that, what are we going to do? This is a case of the Russians hitting a member of NATO. Are we going to then get involved in the war?
I think the probability of the use of nuclear weapons is something to be concerned about?
Absolutely. Let me make 2 points. One is that if the United States gets involved in the fight against Russia, you have a great power war, and you have a great power war that's taking place in Ukraine right on Russia's borders. And that means that there are going to be attacks into Russia by the United States. This is going to be a threat of the greatest magnitude from a Russian point of view, fighting against the United States. And it is possible that nuclear weapons will be used. If the West were to prevail in that conflict, if the United States were to start winning against the Russians, I think it's highly likely that the Russians would turn to nuclear weapons. And once that happens, who knows what escalation looks like? Now, you might say to yourself, okay, this is not likely to happen. But even if the likelihood is small, the consequences are so enormous that we want to, at almost all costs, avoid this. Right. We do not want to have a great power war for fear that we don't want to have a great power war, period. But we don't want to have a great power war because it may escalate into a nuclear war. Let's move over Ukraine, which doesn't matter to the United States at all strategically.